So first I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and Mary Beth, I think this is the last principal's coffee of the year, am I correct? It is? So I wanted to start the meeting first by just focusing on Mary Beth for a moment. She had her first year here as the principal of Coman Hill Elementary School, and it has been such a successful year, and I have to say that it's due in part to the fact that she feels so strongly about the children in Byram Hills. Mary Beth and I are both in new positions, me as a superintendent and her in her position. And when I look at the two of us, I know that the two of us are in these positions because we believe in the education of this school district, and we believe in the children and the collaboration that's happening here. And I think that she's had a very successful year, thanks to the parents who've been such a supportive group, and to the children who've been such good students, and just want to take a moment just to recognize her. So thank you very much. I have been watching the budget for the past 6 years or so that I was assistant superintendent, and I've been asking a lot of questions, and Greg Carlson, who's the assistant superintendent for business, has been very good about working with me over the years. I mean, I go to him like I'm going to class. I say, these are the questions that I have, and he was very good about supporting and answering that. I feel a great obligation to know a lot about the budget, to include the board extensively in the budget development process, and to understand the impact on not only the value of the schools that you have, but your tax-paying dollars. So every time I looked at that budget, I was considering myself writing a check for taxes. Like, how does this impact? What is it going to mean for people in the community? Now, every year with a tax cap, the amount that you can actually bill taxpayers varies. So it can't always be that we have such a great year that we're going to have this year. Things might change, our enrollment might increase, but every single time you look at it, you have to look at it two ways. One, for this particular year, and the other for the subsequent 5 years. Like, where do we see this forecast? So I'm very vested in this budget. These are our beautiful children. I think that's going to be in our school calendar too. I love that picture. And this is the budget development process. So we are about here. We've had all of these meetings, budget hearings so far. We've had opportunities to listen to the public, to see if anybody wanted to make any changes, and to the board members. The board did adopt the budget April 24th, and that means we can move it forward to the voters. So May 8th, we have our last budget hearing, which is a quicker synopsis than what you're going to see today. And then May 15th is at Crittenden, 6:30 in the morning to 9 o'clock at night. And I hope you have an opportunity to vote. I can't tell you how to vote. You could probably imagine what I'm thinking, but I can't tell you how to vote at all. But when we put the budget together, we really started at the beginning of the year by looking at board goals, enrollment projections. Since 2013, we're down a couple of hundred students in the district. Right? So every time your student numbers go down, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can reduce staff. So from last year to this year, we had a huge reduction in staff. 5 staff members and 1 administrative position that we didn't refill. That is a lot of money that goes back into the budget, and it's a lot of money that we don't tax taxpayers for. So last year to this year, our budget to budget increase was 0.8%. It is the lowest I've ever seen it. And so that's what I'm struggling with this year, is looking at that budget and saying, well, how do I measure up to what I thought was a very lean budget last year? So we look at these enrollment projections. Not to be too deceived though, the couple hundred students since 2013, you should know that from last year to this year, it was 22 students K-12. So these are the slow decline of students. 22 students K-12 does not a teacher make, right? So, and this year to next year, they're anticipating 33 student decline K-12. So it isn't always the case when we lose 33 students, unless they're all in one grade, it really doesn't impact our staffing. And complying with all federal and state mandates, many that are unfunded, and we have revenue. It's hard to think of a school as having revenue, right? Because we're not charging for anything, but expenditure projections and factors, I'll talk to you about that. And then our debt service, which is very similar to having a mortgage, right? That is our debt service. Years ago, we put a very big addition on Crittenden and on the high school to accommodate larger numbers of kids, and we're still paying that debt off. So I have to look at the debt, I have to look at what money's coming in from the state, I have to look at money that is mandated, our staffing and our enrollment. So this is our budget to budget increase. 17 to 18 was $90,590,000. And the 18 to 19 proposed budget is a 1.9 increase to 92,347. So the 1.9%, well, you know, as a budget to budget increase, it's not an overwhelming amount of money, but what I'd like to point out is over 1% of that 1.9% are mandated costs. That is a 4.6% increase in the tax levy from last year. And when we looked at our budgets and our finances and our programs, we said, we do not need to ask the taxpayers for that much money. We can ask for 3.4% to continue our programs, to put money aside for our capital improvements, for safety and everything else, and we can actually stay close to $1 million under the tax levy. That is unheard of, and there aren't superintendents who are willing to do this. Superintendents say all the time, you should be billing up to the top of your tax cap levy because you want to be able to put that money into the infrastructure. We feel that at this snapshot moment in time, we don't have to do that. And when I looked at the impact of that close to $1 million on taxpayers, it's important that we make sure that we are using what we need to be using. And fortunately, we've had some very good planning in our business department, and we can now actually say that and do that. Last year, we were $34,000 below the tax cap. So this is our district enrollment that I was telling you about, and if you look from 2013 to 14 until today, you see the couple of hundred student decline that I was mentioning. They say it does level off, the demographers, and keep in mind those kids at the end haven't been born yet, so this is really not as easy to interpret. And if you wanted to know by building where your kids are, the Coman Hill numbers, you'll see from the third set of data, that's 16-17, we were at 470, and 17-18 at 454, but it's projected to go up at Coman Hill next year. Byram Hills Central School District by component. So here you have approximately 70% going to program. I show you this slide because it's very typical for schools. Capital at 18.5%, and that's going to be projects. It's not only projects around the districts, but it's also employees who are working on those projects. And administrative, and I always feel the need to defend this piece. The administrators are not getting paid $10,764,000. You should know that. Administrative covers everything from legal fees, people who are working in the business office, whether it's payroll or accounts receivable. I mean, there's a lot more that goes into administrative than administrative salaries. And if you go on the website, there's no way that I would take you through each of these components, but if you go through the website, you'll see this is where the expenditures are for program, and I'm happy to answer any questions about it at any other time if you'd like. And here are capital expenses, which actually went down from the year before, and administrative, and where the overall costs are. And be careful when you see something like curriculum development, plus 19.2%. 19.2% on a $1 million budget. So you're talking $20,000. So when you're looking at these expenditures, you'll say, okay, $20,000, well, we're putting in a completely new math program, K-5. We decided to allocate some of the money for professional development. But when you look at a number like 19.2, it's pretty shocking. So this is a slide that I tend to be geeking out in the budget world, but this is the slide that really excites me. So this is bond refunding. Now, remember I told you we took out a bond a number of years ago. I mean, I don't know. I've been here since I was 21, so I'm really not sure what year that happened, but we took out a bond for those two capital improvement projects at the middle school and the high school to increase our capacity for students. And we borrowed a significant amount of money at the time. It's very similar to refinancing your house, right? You get a different interest rate and you can accrue some savings that way. I want you to know that just because we had a bond and because we have this debt, it doesn't mean we're not always looking at this debt to say, is there a better way so that we don't spend as much on interest? And because we refunded that bond in 2012 and 13, we've accumulated a savings of over $2 million than had we stayed with our original bond refunding plan. So it's important to always look at these. And one of the bonds that we have will fall off in the next 3 to 4 years and the other by 6 years. So 6 years from now, we will not be carrying this debt. Why is this important? 2 reasons. One, because you see the focus to make sure that we're not
just ignoring that money, like I ignore my cable bill and everything else that comes, that like that's just how much it is. You know, we're not ignoring these finances, we're looking at them. And the other is we're trying so hard, if we can, not to incur more debt. So when I look at other districts around us, I think we've hit 10 districts now in my memory that are looking for bonds. One of them most recently, a smaller bond in a nearby area. But other than that, I've seen bonds between $8 and $80 million in Westchester right now. And this is a lot of money to be asking taxpayers to pay off over time. Bonds are important though. They're kind of like having a mortgage, right? If you can claim your interest, it behooves you to have a mortgage. So at the time that these bonds are finished, there may be an opportunity where we look at a large project and it makes sense over time for us to parcel that out through a bond, but we're trying desperately not to add to the debt that we currently have. And our debt service, this is what I was telling you, that by 2022 or 23, we will be finishing. So how have we been paying this debt off over time? This might be helpful to you. These were our existing obligations, and as you can see, these obligations are being reduced over time, but we are funding them two different ways. We had funding from insurance revenue that we were able to pay down this debt. You never want to use a reserve fund for your operational costs. So what we have been trying to do is have money, whatever money we have in reserves right now, and paying off that debt over time. There are some districts that are looking to have their budgets pay off their bonds. And when you do that, you run the risk of the problem of now you are allocating your taxpayers' dollars to something that's not an operational expense. We have to really be focusing on operational expenses as we're moving along. And not incurring debt that we're paying off with the taxpayer dollars. We have to reserve those funds. So what does this look like? What are our revenues? Yes, we have revenues. The district actually pulls in money every year. So we do have our real property taxes that I talked to you about and the projected revenue that we would take, the 3.4%. We have pilots, payment in lieu of taxes. We have a couple of corporations that are in town, and they make an agreement with the town. We're going to pay this amount of money for school taxes over the next 5 years. Well, there's a little bit of a problem there, if anybody can see it. This is not controlled by the schools. This is controlled by the negotiations between the corporations and the town. And what they're finding is that these buildings, these big corporate parks that were so popular years ago and drew a lot of businesses in and were able to provide us with rather large pilots, are not the model anymore. So a lot of these companies are saying, you know, these buildings are now old, they're antiquated, and this isn't the model anymore. And the value of a lot of these properties, when it's been assessed, has been decreased. So with that come companies. We had one who said, we don't want to be on a pilot anymore, we want to go on the tax roll. We had another company who had a large reduction in their pilot. Unfortunately, those are things I have no control over. I don't sit at the table to do assessables. I don't have any knowledge of how to assess a property or a home. And we don't have that jurisdiction to help that. But we do other revenue. We have some students who are tuition paying students. We do receive a certain amount of money from sales tax. And you'll see and we do receive some money back from BOCES. We joined this cooperative with BOCES, and many times when we pay for a service through BOCES, we are aided back some of the money. So we try to always work through those organizations. And then state aid. We're expecting a little over $4 million this year in state aid. We are not a high-need school. We do not receive a lot of state aid. It doesn't mean that we don't have mandated services that we have to provide for students, and that has to come out of our costs. And then fund balance. You're allowed to carry over 4% of a budget from year to year in a fund balance, and we have been able to do that. And I have to say that having the fund balance go over from year to year, this is not like we over budgeted by $3 million. This is, well, when we looked at our fuel costs, they were significantly lower than we anticipated. Like this year, the state aid, you know, we never really know. We don't have a defined number from the state. So we're assuming, based upon their calculations, that that will be it. But that is a conservative estimate for us. So maybe we're going to get $200,000 more from state aid. And that would go into the fund balance for us to carry over from year to year. It's much better than what most people are carrying over from year to year in their homes. Tax percent rate of change. This is the moment you probably are waiting for. If you live in North Castle, Newcastle, Bedford, or Mount Pleasant, how will this affect your taxes? So in looking at this, this is take a look at Bedford, for example. I mean, in 14-15, down 6.79%, 15-16, up 12.45%. I mean, these are numbers that we have very limited control over. So this is how your tax rate is assessed from the town, and then the percentage of the tax dollars toward that tax rate. So when I look at these numbers, I was actually fidgeting with if we had, because yes, does it behoove the district to take that $920,000 and put it into our capital reserve fund in case we need a new roof? But I feel very comfortable in our current financial standing, we didn't need to do that. And when I looked at the impact of that $920,000, how it was going to impact taxpayers in that last column, we said we don't need to do this right now, then we shouldn't be doing it. So you'll see that there are some increases in North Castle and Mount Pleasant, and crazy enough, Newcastle for the first time ever is having a reduction. Bedford is having a reduction also. And these, as you can see, this is very dependent on the assessables from the town, how the town is assessing. But I like this slide, I mean, it makes me feel good. And this next slide makes me feel good too, the true value tax rate. So when you look at the true value tax rate, this is how they're trying to create an even playing field. They're trying to say, if I live in Pleasantville, or if I live in Ossining, or if I live in Katona, how do my taxes compare to people in other districts? And the true value tax rate is taking that levy that I told you we are shooting for and taking the full value of your property. So Byram Hill's true value tax rate, they would say if all houses were even, in Ossining, in Pleasantville, in Armonk, in Katona, if all houses were even, we pay $13.48 per thousand. Why is that important? If you look at and you compare us to other districts in the region, Mount Vernon is at $34.86 per thousand of full value. Byram Hills, in this number of 53 schools, ranks 46th. This is where we want to be. We want to know that our true value tax rate is lower than all of these other places. Now, that means a $300,000 home in one place and a $300,000 home in another place, which isn't the truth, because one area it might be a $700 home, and this area a $300 home, but you are paying a true value tax rate lower than these counterparts. Now, it doesn't sound appealing. Like if I'm paying $70,000 a year in taxes, like this doesn't really make me feel like, how does that still happen? But consider that if that house were in that other district, what you would be paying in those taxes if that house were valued at the same amount of money. So this is always where we want to be and where we've consistently been. So continuing the vision. I keep this here as a nod to my predecessor, the first bullet. Every student K-11 will have opportunities afforded our graduating seniors. Bill Donahue and I used to talk about that a lot because we don't believe it. It's our benchmark, but we always want to exceed it. Like that is the point of us having it there. Yes, we want every student to have the opportunities afforded these graduating seniors, but we really want more, and in a different way than the current seniors have, right? So look at all the coding and robotics and everything that's happening to kids right now. 5 years ago, the seniors were not having those experiences. So what our budget aims to do is to look at every opportunity that we can that will help support students to achieve what they want to achieve and in areas that interest them. Schooling is not about sitting behind a desk and this like rote memorization and learning anymore. We've been spending a considerable amount of time and money and training and teachers who are very passionate and interested in changing the dynamic of the classroom because they're starting to understand learners a little bit more. And also, we have all of this technology at our hands. We can understand what is new and exciting out there. So when we look at every student K-11 having these opportunities, as a school district, we take a stand on that. So this past year, I asked our math department chairperson, our director of technology, and they took a few teachers with them to go out and explore engineering courses in colleges. We're doing so much with STEAM, and we're doing so much with engineering, and we understand the K-12 lens, but we don't really understand what colleges are expecting. So they went to visit some of our heavy-hitting colleges where many of our students get into. They sat through classes, they met with faculty, they looked at syllabus, and they sat with former students, alumni, and they asked them questions to make sure that what we're doing right now is actually preparing the students for this next level of their lives. So that's the other piece that I think is really important in this, giving every student, every senior the same opportunity. And our program and services are benchmarked, so I handed out that special recognition document. Dr. Kaltenecker does this every year, and it just really highlights a lot of the special recognition for students and programs that we have. And I think it's great as a taxpayer, even if your children are very far away from now, to start having a lens toward what is there now and what changes by the time you get there. And here, we are slow about change, and we're happy to be slow about change. We don't want to rush into something because it looks like a great idea. You know, if you look at that math program, investigations, we looked at changing this K-5 math program. They spent 2 years studying all of these different math programs, and then they piloted a few of the math programs they were considering before, as a committee, they even got together to make a decision about one. And I think that that's the way we need to move. And interestingly enough, Dr. Kaltenecker, years ago, wanted that math program. But just because he's has a math background and is an education expert doesn't mean that that's the way it should happen. He took them through that process to vet out that math program. So, and programs are on our website, should anybody want to watch them there also. So what does our budget include? Programs and services, and the state and federally mandated, I've said all this. But especially athletic programs and extracurricular activities. And when your children get a little bit older, to see the value in having that and have them be part of a school community is very, very important. And we're fortunate, we're not an enormous community. So kids can feel like this is their school community and it's not an institution that they go to. So what are you going to see the day of the budget vote? Proposition 1 is the school budget vote. Proposition 2 is approval for expenditure from capital reserve. That requires more information. And the third is a trustee vote. We have 2 positions for 3-year terms on the Board of Education. We have 2 people running and they are currently board members. So that's not so difficult. But I also have to say, the consistency and the commitment of the Board of Education to remain is fantastic for us. We have a very cooperative board and a lot of board members with very specific expertise, financial expertise, human resources expertise. I can't tell you how wonderful that group is, and the commitment that they're making to continue doing this as a group is pretty outstanding. Especially if you ever watch a board meeting of another district. It's like night and day from where we are. We'd rather have people collaborating. So Proposition 2 that requires some explanation. Last year, we went to the public and we asked you to approve a capital reserve fund. And remember, there's a very limited number of reserve funds that schools are allowed to have, and they come with very high restrictions. So a capital reserve fund would enable us to put up to $10 million in that fund over the course of its life and utilize it for capital reserve projects. So in other words, preventing us from going out for a bond because we need to repair a roof, or going out for a bond for a new boiler system. So the capital reserve fund, we were able to allocate some of the monies, unfunded expenses, into that reserve fund at the end of last year and the beginning of this year. Just in time. I mean, we've done an athletic facilities review, and we have been told that this coming school year is the last year that it is probably safe to use the turf and track at the high school. The turf and track at the high school has exceeded its life expectancy by approximately 5 years. And it's only due to good maintenance. We have a company that comes in and maintains it for us. But they've told us, they do these bounce tests that, what is the impact, and all the other testing has told us that we have 1 more year. So what we need to do is ask permission from the public now. Okay, you told us we could create this reserve fund. We were able to put unfunded expenses into it. Now do we have your permission to spend the money to replace the turf and track? We're not trying to create like Nassau Coliseum, or you know what I mean? We really need to replace. It will look nicer because it will be brand new, but we're just replacing the existing structure that's there. And that's about a $1.7 million expense, and would have been significantly higher had we not had good drainage underneath. But the Floor is in good condition, so they're really just looking for that replacement of the track and the turf. And that to come from the capital reserve. And you know, we're not, just so you're aware, we're not looking at every capital project to come out of a capital reserve. I'm looking right now into a co-generator for the high school. We've been exploring this all year long. A co-generator to replace an enhancement to our boiler system that will allow us to co-generate our own energy. In doing so, we would have enough ampage, for lack of a better word, to completely air condition the high school. Otherwise, you know, if you ever bought an old home, you have to go in and redo that whole electrical system. I mean, it's to increase your capacity. It would be a tremendous cost savings for us to use our own energy and to be able to expand our energy to have that air conditioning. And if that works very well, we would be looking to do that in different schools as well. That is in our regular budget. That is not in a capital reserve budget. So just know that we are, you know, even security measures, putting up fences, this is not coming out of a capital reserve. This is something we're putting into the regular budget. So that is important for us at the high school, and if everybody, if we get a positive vote for that, our next step is to start going through the state education department. We've already met with architects. It pretty much takes a year for the state education department to come out, spec your project, give you an okay to move forward. So that would be, construction would be happening not this summer, but next summer. But that's very normal in the whole state education department improvement world, unfortunately. And the trustee vote. And once again, May 15th, the budget vote at Crittenden Middle School. Love it if you could come. And here are our beautiful children. I wanted to give you a glimpse of what your children will have the opportunity to do next year, when they get to Wampus, if they're not second graders, but to have their field day, which is really the greatest event of all time, and well loved by the kids. So, any questions? And don't feel bad if you don't. I mean, nobody's had questions for me, and it's okay. I trust.
You mentioned generator. I remember during the recent storms that there wasn't a generator in this building.
Yes.
Is that something you're considering?
So the co-generator serves as a generator, and I can move that one to Coleman Hill
Yeah.
from the high school. Yeah.
It's portable.
It's portable for a lot of money to move it, but
Okay.
but you know, it's like,
It's just buying like a used jet. it's just
right,
like
you're not going to buy a new
generator.
home, you're just going to move your home. It's like sometimes a little cheaper to do that, so, but it would enable us to bring that generator over here. Yeah. Yeah, and I told him mistruth. I always thought Wampus had a generator. They don't have one. Wampus happens to be on a line that never loses its power.
Just blinks a few times.
Yeah, so to me, you know, Crittenden had lost power and was on their generator, and Wampus was on at the same time. And I forgot Wampus didn't have a generator because it was on when Crittenden's generator was on, and
So this all happens if the vote passes? If
Yes.
this- Okay, and then, so when do you think, when do you plan on doing that at the high school?
the work. So
Yeah.
we will spend, the second it passes, we will start our state education documentation, and we expect construction the next summer, not this coming one, the one after.
And do you have future plans to put AC in other
If
buildings?
this co-generator system works, it's an affordable option for us to go throughout the other buildings.
Great.
It really was a process that brought us all together and made us think about what are our values in terms of kids as learners. So that was one thing that we did. We've also been looking at bringing together our science curriculum over the next couple of years. Science framework has changed again, and there are new standards. So we've been looking at curriculum that will also span a continuum going through kindergarten all the way up to the high school. The other piece that I'm really proud of is not so much the curriculum, which I am proud of, but we've also done a lot of work on emotional wellness throughout the district. And it's been a really great process in terms of our growth and in terms of expanding our lens on the whole child, as opposed to just the academics or just kids that are having emotional difficulties. And we've learned a lot about how important it is to take care of emotional wellness in our children, because if we're not, then they're not going to be accessible to learning, no matter how bright they might be or how quickly they might learn. I mean, think about your worst day if you're really distracted by something that upset you or something that's on your mind, you're not going to be focused on the things that could make it a productive day for you. So we've been doing a lot of work. We started years ago with PBIS. You've got Kelso's choice here, and we had we still have the PBIS program at Wampus with Be Your Bobcat Best. But now that's expanded into helping kids learn about their emotions and how to identify them and regulate them, and teaching strategies on how to move from the ones that are not so productive. And that's really been a lot of validating work for all of us. I know we've got teachers that have been trained through Yale in an emotional wellness program that they have there, and we have the mood meter at Wampus where kids are learning what quadrant they are in the mood meter, and how to identify, is this a good place to be or a not good place to be. So we've been doing a lot of work in emotional wellness. We've been talking a lot about growth mindset and teaching kids. We talk a lot about those skills that kids are going to need to have that we might not even be aware of at this point. Because if you think about where they're at now, when we were kids, we had no idea that there would be a world of technology that we have now. Just the whole technology, everything has exploded in technology, such that the kids are going to be preparing for jobs that might not even be in existence yet. So we've worked a lot, again, across the building, and very conscientiously on what we call the 5 C's, which are, and here, Mary Beth, you may have to help me here. I'm retiring because I'm forgetting all of these C's. We have community, collaboration, creativity, cooperation, and there's one more, which is community, creativity, critical thinking. And those skills are the kinds of skills that we're threading through all of the children's learning throughout their academics, because those are the skills that if there's a job 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road that we've never heard of, those things are still going to be part of being successful at that job. Those are the kinds of skills that surpass, the periodic table, or surpass, how to solve a quadrilateral whatever. Those are the skills that are going to go through everything. And we've been working a lot on that as well. So I think you won't find a huge difference in Wampus because we have worked so hard. And we've done the 5 C's with each other in terms of making sure that we're clearly communicating where we need to go and how we get there, and what does that look like in kindergarten, and in the 1st grade, and in the 2nd grade, and the 3rd grade, but how does it continue to progress. So, basically, I'm here to reassure you that Wampus is not a big bad school. I remember when I first started here, it was considered a big bad school because the shift is more academic. We do start the state testing in Wampus. It is something that a lot of parents are concerned about when they come, because it's like, here are now these tests that the kids have to take. Be assured that we really prepare well, not by doing test prep, but by embedding all of the things that they need to know, such that when they get to those assessments, they're going to do just fine. Our goal is really to make kids feel happy in their environment, to feel joyful about learning, and to feel safe that they can take risks, and if it doesn't work, try it again, or get rid of it and do something different. But we're trying to teach those kinds of things that are so important in their lives and our lives and their futures. Yes?
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
I know Coleman Hill is so great with the CAST program and the pulling out to make sure that the kids are doing well if they need help, even the ones that need a little bit of extra just because they aren't being challenged and all of that. I was just wondering if Wampus is just like that. Like, I was so pleasantly pleased with everything that Coleman Hill had to offer.
Right.
So I'm just,
We don't have a pullout for that. Well, we have a couple of different things. Let me tell you one of the reasons why we used to have it, but we don't anymore. And that is something that started off not in our control. Probably 6 or 7 years ago, the state mandated, after the test became a 3, 4, 5 every year kind of a thing, they mandated that any children that were below a proficient score on their test were required by law to receive extra support services. So whereas we used to have discretion and look at kids' other things, because I mean, if you have a bad day and you take a test, that's a snapshot in one day. That is not going to really give you a clear picture. But the state at that time was saying that's what you're going to use as your benchmark for kids receiving services. So all of a sudden now, the people that we had as support teachers for math and for ELA had caseloads that were, they weren't prohibitive, but because that was a mandated legal support, enrichment was not. So and other than hiring more and more people to do the enrichment piece of it, we started to think, okay, what do we really need to do with enrichment? So what are we doing about enrichment? There's a couple of things. Well, investigations, I'm going to use that as a good example, because one of the things that came out of our study was that there was so much room in investigations for kids of all levels to engage in new learning. So there wasn't a top where
That's
if
the math. I don't
the
know if
math.
we ever said that.
Oh, yes, that's the math program. If kids are at the top, there's room for them to go. Where in some programs that we looked at, you really had to find ways to enrich and enhance. So in terms of curriculum, we're looking at things that expand the opportunities for all kids to engage and all kids to learn. Not for the kids to get to this point and then be helpers with the kids that might need a little extra help, because our feeling is that all kids need to learn. We've also done a lot of work with creating what we call PBLs, which are project-based learning, which are open-ended sort of question approaches to learning, where kids, again, can access that information, the content they need, and how to solve those problems, and how to create some kind of a product wherever they're at as well. We have the Hub 21. I don't know if some of you who have been to Wampus may have, this is fairly new, it's our second year. We cut out a couple of classroom walls and made a big alternative learning environment. It's 3 rooms, and it's basically, it started out as our STEAM place, like, okay, science, we don't have a science lab, wouldn't it be great to have a place where we could go do science? And it turned into a wonderfully gorgeous environment for the kids to go to. But within that environment, we're looking for the opportunity for kids to be able to explore and make choices. If they have peers that are looking at something in the same way that they're looking at, they've got freedom to make those choices, and we're evolving into that more authentic look. The other thing we're looking at too is kids don't develop at the same rate. So one of the things that we want to make sure of is that enrichment is for everybody, because one child may not be so proficient in math in 3rd grade, but all of a sudden in 4th grade they've got ahas and they've made connections, and now all of a sudden they're getting it just like that. So we're trying to make sure that all the kids have that opportunity for enrichment, and within those opportunities there's room for access for all of the kids so that they do get new learning. The programs are the same, and placement is the same process. In fact, Mary Beth comes over to Wampus when we're doing placement, and we get all kinds of input from every single 2nd grade teacher. So it's a very comprehensive process, but again, you know, because we're looking at the schools as a K-12 as opposed to Coleman Hill, well, now we're going to Wampus, and this is Wampus, and we do things like this in Wampus, you're gonna find it's a very similar environment in terms of programs.
And as far as the transition, do the kids go over at the end of the year?
They do.
They do.
They take a
Maybe
field
have a
trip.
buddy system like we have with the kindergartners and the 2nd graders here?
They'll come to
Or-
visit, and then in August, the 3rd grade teachers host, once the classroom assignments have gone out and the kids all know who their teacher is, they come back in August and they go into their classroom. It's all set up before the rest of the school gets there, and they have just like donuts and water bottles,
So they
and
meet their
they get to
teacher.
see their kids, they meet the teacher, they get to see who else is in the room.
Do you know the date of that?
It's usually,
it's summer.
it's summer, it's summer. It's usually, I think it's around, it's the 2nd day of Superintendent's Conference Day, I believe, which is late August.
Right before Memorial Day.
I mean, Labor Day. Labor Day.
Last week of
Yeah.
August. Okay.
And that's nice too, because they come to the school and seen the school and met all of the teachers, but at that particular day, it's their class, their teacher, and it's a welcome to Wampus.
And around when do we find out the teacher?
The 2nd week of August. And we found that the third grade teachers just started doing that 3 years ago, and we found an interesting correlation between, prior to that, we always had second graders coming in the first day of school in tears, just for stress and not, whatever. We haven't had any tears since the third grade teachers started doing this little get together, which really told us how important it was for them to see a face, to feel welcome, and to see the other kids in the class. Because it was like, oh, my friend is here. And it was just, it's such a great experience for them. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.